Samuel Reed had never expected to be anything more than a note-taker at the Galactic Summit. He sat in the back row of the assembly hall on Harmony Watch, watching the real diplomats argue about trade routes and border disputes. Earth was too new to the galactic community to have much say in anything important. Samuel's job was simple: watch, listen, and file reports that nobody back home would probably read. The hall itself was enormous, built to accommodate dozens of different species. The air smelled strange, a mixture of different atmospheres blended together so everyone could breathe. Some delegates were breathing masks anyway. The Ascari delegation sat in the front section, their insectoid bodies covered in gleaming chitin armor that caught the light. Queen Silith sat at the center of her group, perfectly still. Samuel had read that Ascari queens could sit motionless for hours when thinking deeply. The current speaker was a Drachner warlord named Grath. He was massive, easily 3 meters tall, with scales that looked like they could stop bullets. His voice boomed through the translation devices everyone wore. He was demanding that the Ascari Empire surrender control of 3 mining systems on their shared border. The resources there belong to the strong, he said, not to those who hid behind ancient treaties. Several delegates tried to calm the situation, offering compromises and suggesting neutral arbitration. Grath rejected everything. His people needed those resources. The Ascari had plenty of space and plenty of wealth. They should share or face the consequences. Samuel watched Queen Silith rise from her seat. The hall went quiet immediately. Even Grath stopped talking. The Ascari queen commanded respect in a way Samuel had never seen before. She didn't need to shout or threaten. Her presence alone demanded attention. Warlord Grath speaks of strength, Queen Silith said. Her voice was calm, but carried clearly through every translator. He believes force determines right. But there is another way. An older way, one my people have not practiced in 3 generations. She turned to address the entire assembly, not just Grath. The Ascari bond marriage is our most sacred tradition. When 2 rival clans face destruction through endless war, their leaders would join through this bond. The chosen partner becomes co-regent, sharing all authority over military and diplomatic matters. It is not merely symbolic. It is absolute unity. Murmurs spread through the hall. Samuel saw several delegates leaning forward, interested now. Bond marriages were legendary but rarely practiced anymore. Most species considered them too risky, giving too much power to outsiders. I propose a bond marriage now, Queen Silith continued. Not between Ascari clans, but between species. A symbol that unity is stronger than division. That cooperation can achieve what conquest cannot. Grath laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. And who would you choose, Queen? Another insect to whisper sweet promises while sharpening knives? I choose a human, Queen Silith said. The hall erupted. Delegates shouted questions. Some laughed. Others looked confused. Humans? Earth had barely joined the galactic community 20 years ago. They had no military power, no great fleets, no ancient wisdom. They were newcomers, practically children by galactic standards. Samuel felt his stomach drop. There were only 3 humans at the entire summit. Ambassador Liu was the senior diplomat, but she was back on Earth dealing with an emergency. Her assistant had gotten food poisoning from trying alien cuisine 2 days ago and was still in medical care. That left only Samuel. Queen Silith's compound eyes somehow found him in the back row. She pointed directly at him. Samuel Reed of Earth, I choose you. Every head in the assembly turned to look at him. Samuel couldn't breathe. This had to be a mistake. He was nobody. A junior diplomat who filed reports and took notes. He'd been to exactly 4 alien worlds in his entire life. He didn't know anything about Ascari culture or galactic politics or how to stop a war. But Queen Silith was walking toward him now. moving through the rows of seats with her 4 legs carrying her gracefully. Her honor guard followed, but kept their distance. When she reached Samuel, she stopped and looked down at him. Up close, her alien features were striking. Compound eyes that seemed to see everything. Mandibles that moved slightly as she breathed. Antennae that twitched with what might have been curiosity. "I have studied your species," she said quietly, speaking just to him now. "Humans are unique. You adapt faster than any species we have encountered. You solve problems in ways others never consider. You feel deeply, which others call weakness, but I see strength. When you care about something, you become unstoppable. When you are pushed too far, you become something even more dangerous." "Your Majesty," Samuel managed to say, "I'm not a soldier. I'm not even a real diplomat. I just take notes." "I do not need another soldier," Queen Sylith said. "I have 1,000,000 soldiers. I need someone who thinks differently. Someone who can see solutions my people cannot. Will you accept this bond? Will you help me prevent the war that Warlord Grath desires?" Samuel looked past her at Grath, who was watching with obvious amusement. The Drakner warlord clearly thought this was a joke. Choosing a human was an admission of weakness. It would make the Askari look desperate and foolish. But Samuel also saw something else. He saw the other delegates watching carefully. Some looked hopeful. They didn't want war either. They wanted someone to find a way out of this crisis. And for some reason, Queen Sylith believed a human could do it. Samuel stood up. His legs felt shaky, but he kept his voice steady. "I accept." Queen Sylith touched his shoulder with one of her hands. Her grip was surprisingly gentle for someone with an exoskeleton. "Then we begin. Come, we have much to discuss and very little time." As they left the assembly hall together, Samuel heard Grath laughing behind them. The sound followed them all the way to the transport pad. Samuel tried not to think about what he'd just agreed to. He tried not to think about the fact that he might have just become responsible for preventing a galactic war. He especially tried not to think about the fact that he had absolutely no idea how to do that. 3 weeks had passed since Samuel arrived on Chiton Prime, and he still felt like an imposter. The Askari homeworld was beautiful in an alien way. Their cities looked like massive termite mounds made of colored glass, rising kilometers into the purple sky. Everything was built for beings with exoskeletons and 4 legs. Samuel had bruised his shoulders more than once on doorways designed for different body shapes. General Skrell made his opinion clear at every opportunity. The Askari military commander had compound eyes that somehow managed to look dismissive despite being completely alien. During strategy meetings, he would click his mandibles whenever Samuel spoke. The sound meant disagreement in Askari body language. Samuel heard it a lot. "The human suggests we negotiate," Skrell said during one such meeting. "Again, perhaps if we ask very nicely, the Drakner will decide not to kill us." Queen Sylith remained calm. She always did. "Samuel is correct that we should exhaust diplomatic options first. War should be the last choice, not the first." "War is already here," Skrell replied. "The Drakner destroyed the mining colony at Redshift Point yesterday. 5,000 dead. They did not negotiate. They acted." Samuel had seen the reports. 5,000 Askari colonists killed when Drakner warships bombarded the settlement from orbit. No warning, no demands. Just destruction. Warlord Grath sent a message afterward. Surrender the contested systems or more colonies would burn. "Which is exactly why we need to meet with Grath face to face," Samuel said. "We need to understand what he really wants." Skrell's mandibles clicked rapidly. "He wants our systems. He wants our resources. He wants us dead or subjugated. What is complicated about this? People who only want destruction don't bother with warnings," Samuel argued. "Grath is trying to force us to surrender, yes, but there might be reasons behind it. Internal pressure, resource scarcity, cultural requirements we don't understand. If we can address the underlying causes, we might prevent a full war. Queen Sylith considered this. You wish to meet with Grath personally? Yes, on neutral ground. Just him, me, and you. No fleets, no armies. Just talking. Skrull left the meeting chamber in disgust, his heavy legs thudding on the floor. Several other military advisors followed him. Samuel watched them go and felt his confidence waver. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was being naive, but Queen Sylith agreed to the meeting. 2 days later, Samuel found himself on a small neutral station at the border between Ascari and Draknar space. The station was automated, maintained by the Galactic Trade Commission. Just 3 rooms and a docking bay. Perfect for secret meetings that might accomplish nothing. Warlord Grath arrived exactly on time. He had to duck to fit through the doorway, even though the station was built to accommodate large species. His scales were dark red, almost black in the dim light. He moved like a predator, economical and precise. 2 guards flanked him, but they stayed outside as agreed. The human, Grath said. His translator gave his voice a rough, grinding quality. Queen Sylith brings a pet to negotiate. I speak for the Ascari Empire with full authority, Samuel said. He kept his voice steady even though his heart was pounding. Grath could probably tear him apart without effort. We're here to prevent unnecessary death. Unnecessary? Grath laughed. Death is never unnecessary. It is the universe's way of sorting the strong from the weak. Queen Sylith spoke then. You wish to be seen as strong, Warlord Grath, but strength takes many forms. Anyone can destroy. Building requires true power. They talked for 6 hours. Samuel learned that the Draknar Confederation was facing internal problems. Their population was growing faster than their resources. Young warriors demanded glory and conquest because their culture offered few other paths to status. Warlord Grath faced pressure from rival leaders who said he was too cautious, too weak. The attack on Redshift Point was meant to prove his strength. Samuel proposed something radical: joint resource development in the contested systems. The Draknar would get the materials they needed, but through cooperation rather than conquest. They would also establish joint military exercises to build trust and give the Draknar warriors the training and glory their culture demanded. Grath was skeptical. His people valued honor through combat. They didn't trust easily. But Samuel pointed out that warriors could gain honor through difficult training just as well as through war. Maybe better because it showed discipline and control. You think like no one I have met, Grath said finally. Most species would threaten or plead. You offer something valuable while making it sound like my idea. Very clever, human. I just want to find a solution everyone can accept, Samuel said. Grath agreed to a trial period. 6 months of joint operations. If it worked, the Draknar would recognize Ascari sovereignty over the contested systems. If it failed, they would revisit the situation. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than war. Samuel returned to Chiton Prime exhausted, but hopeful. Queen Sylith seemed pleased. Even General Skrull admitted, grudgingly, that perhaps the human had some use after all. For 3 weeks the arrangement held. Draknar and Ascari forces conducted joint training exercises. Resource-sharing agreements were drafted and implemented. There were problems, of course. Cultural misunderstandings and old prejudices don't disappear overnight. But progress was being made. Samuel began to relax. He spent more time with Queen Sylith, learning about Ascari philosophy and art. She seemed genuinely interested in human culture too. They would sit in her private garden, surrounded by plants that looked like crystals, and discuss the nature of cooperation and trust. You have done well, she told him one evening. You may have prevented a war through simple honesty and creative thinking. My choice was correct. Samuel smiled. For the first time since accepting the bond marriage, he felt like he belonged here. Like he was actually making a difference. That same night, the alarm started. Samuel rushed to the war room with Queen Sylith. The holographic displays showed a nightmare. 17 Ascari colonies under simultaneous attack. Drachner warships had dropped out of hyperspace at every joint training site at exactly the same moment. The Ascari forces there had been slaughtered before they could react. General Skrell was already coordinating defensive responses, his voice clipped and professional despite the disaster unfolding. He saw Samuel enter and his mandibles clicked once. It was the Ascari equivalent of saying, "I told you so." Warlord Graf appeared on the main view screen. He looked pleased with himself. "I thank you for the training exercises, human. My warriors learned much about Ascari tactics and fleet positions. Your trust was very informative." "You gave your word," Samuel said quietly. "We had an agreement." "I gave the word a Drachner gives to prey," Graf replied. "Honor is for equals. You are insects to be crushed. But I offer mercy. Surrender the contested systems now, along with 5 additional systems as penalty for making us wait. Do this, or we will burn every Ascari world to ash." The transmission ended. Samuel stood motionless, watching the casualty reports climb. Hundreds of thousands dead already. Entire colonies burning. He had trusted Graf. He had believed diplomacy could work. He had been completely, catastrophically wrong. Queen Sylith touched his shoulder. "This is not your fault." But it was. Samuel had convinced them to let their guard down. He had arranged the joint exercises that gave the Drachner perfect intelligence about Ascari defenses. His naive human optimism had gotten people killed. General Skrell was organizing retreats and defensive positions. He was good at his job, but Samuel could see the situation was desperate. The Drachner had planned this perfectly. They had overwhelming force at every critical location. Samuel felt something change inside him. The hope that had carried him through the negotiation died. The belief that people could be reasoned with shattered. What replaced it was colder, harder. "General Skrell," Samuel said. His voice sounded different even to himself. "I need complete access to all military databases. Fleet positions, weapons capabilities, tactical history. Everything." Skrell looked at Queen Sylith, who nodded. "Give him what he needs. What are you planning?" The general asked. Samuel didn't answer immediately. He was already thinking about human history. About wars where smaller forces beat larger ones through unconventional tactics. About the terrible creativity humans applied when they stopped trying to be civilized and started trying to win. "I tried to be a diplomat," Samuel said finally. "I tried to be reasonable and kind and fair. Graf taught me that was a mistake. So now I'm going to be human instead." General Skrell didn't sleep. Ascari could go weeks without rest when necessary, relying on their efficient metabolism. So he was in the war room when Samuel arrived at what humans called 3 in the morning. The human looked terrible. His eyes were red and his clothes were wrinkled. But he carried a data tablet covered in notes. "I have new orders," Samuel said without preamble. "Withdraw all remaining forces from the contested border systems immediately." Skrell's antennae twitched in surprise. "Withdraw? That is surrender. The Drachner will claim those systems unopposed. Let them. Pull everything back to the secondary defensive line. Make it look like we're retreating in panic." "We would be retreating in panic," Skrell pointed out. "The Drachner have us outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Your diplomatic experiment failed. Now we face extermination." Samuel looked at the general with those strange human eyes. Skrell had studied human biology. He knew humans were social creatures who valued empathy and cooperation. They were practically pacifists compared to warrior races like the Drachner. But something in Samuel's expression now made Skrell uncomfortable. The human looked focused in a way that seemed wrong somehow. Predatory. "The experiment didn't fail," Samuel said. "It gave me exactly what I needed. I know how Grath thinks now. I know what he values and what he expects. He thinks we'll either surrender or fight conventionally. He's wrong." Skrell clicked his mandibles skeptically, but agreed to present the withdrawal order to Queen Sylith. She approved it immediately. Within hours, Ascari forces began pulling back from the border systems. The Drachner advanced into the vacuum, taking control of mining stations and resource deposits. From any conventional military perspective, the Ascari were losing badly, but Samuel was ordering other movements too. Small scout ships repositioned to unusual locations. Supply vessels altered their routes for no apparent reason. Automated defense platforms were powered down in some areas and relocated to others. None of it made obvious sense. "What is your strategy?" Skrell demanded after 3 days of watching the Drachner advance. "We cannot retreat forever." Samuel looked up from the tactical display he'd been studying. Human military history has a saying, "Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake." Graf is advancing fast because he thinks he's winning. He's spreading his forces thin to claim as much territory as possible. That's a mistake. How is claiming territory a mistake? Because he's not securing his supply lines properly. Look here. Samuel highlighted several systems on the map. Every Drachner battle group needs regular resupply, fuel, ammunition, food. They have supply convoys moving through these routes. Grath is so focused on advancing that he's left these convoys barely defended. Skrell saw it then. The supply routes formed a network behind the Drachner advance. Cut those routes and the battle groups would be stranded, unable to continue offensive operations. But attacking supply convoys instead of military targets went against every principle of honorable warfare. "That is cowardly," Skrell said. "Warriors fight warriors, not unarmed supply ships." "Warriors die when they have no ammunition," Samuel replied. "This isn't about honor. This is about survival. We don't have the ships to beat Grath in a fair fight. So we won't fight fair." The first convoy was destroyed 3 days later. A small Ascari strike team hit a group of Drachner supply vessels in transit. The attack was quick and brutal. The convoy was destroyed before it could send a distress signal. The Drachner didn't even know it was missing until their forward. Battle groups started running low on fuel. Samuel hit 3 more convoys over the next week. Each attack was different. Sometimes the Ascari ships ambushed from behind asteroid fields. Sometimes they pretended to be disabled vessels until the convoy got close. Once, Samuel had them hack into Drachner communication systems and give false orders that sent a convoy directly into an automated defense platform. The Drachner started assigning warships to protect their convoys. Samuel had predicted this. Now those warships weren't available for offensive operations. The advance slowed. Grath's forces began consolidating instead of pushing forward. But Samuel wasn't done. He started broadcasting messages on frequencies he knew the Drachner monitored. The messages questioned Grath's competence. They pointed out how many warriors were dying for minimal gain. They suggested that a truly strong leader would have won by now. It was psychological warfare. Humans had been doing it for thousands of years, but the galactic community considered it distasteful. Honorable species didn't try to confuse or demoralize their opponents. They fought cleanly. Samuel didn't care about fighting cleanly anymore. The messages worked. Drachner intercepted communications showed confusion and frustration. Some junior commanders questioned Grath's orders. The unified Drachner advance fractured slightly as different groups pursued their own objectives. Then Samuel sprang his real trap. He had been studying the Drachner advance for 2 weeks, noting patterns and predicting movements. He knew where Grath's main battle group would be on a specific date. Samuel positioned a massive Ascari fleet there. hidden in the sensor shadow of a gas giant. When Grath's forces arrived, they found what looked like a vulnerable Ascari supply depot. It was too tempting to ignore. Grath ordered an attack, committing a third of his entire military to destroying what he thought was an easy target. The supply depot was empty. Just automated drones creating false sensor signatures. The real Ascari fleet emerged from hiding and attacked while the Drachner were out of formation. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, Grath had lost over 30 warships and thousands of warriors. It was the first major Ascari victory of the war. General Skrell found Samuel in the war room afterward, staring at the casualty reports. The human's hands were shaking slightly. Thousands of Drachner were dead because of Samuel's plan. The general expected the human to seem pleased or at least satisfied. Instead, Samuel looked sick. "Are you well?" Skrell asked. Samuel didn't answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "I just killed thousands of beings by lying to them. I manipulated them into a trap like they were stupid animals. And it worked. It worked so well. You won a battle. You saved Ascari lives. I know. That's what makes it worse. I'm good at this." Samuel looked at Skrell with those unsettling human eyes. "Your people have been spacefaring for 10,000 years. You've fought countless wars. But you fight with honor and rules and traditions. Humans are newer to the galaxy. We don't have 10,000 years of civilized warfare. We have 10,000 years of doing whatever it took to survive against enemies who wanted us dead. We learned to be creative, adaptable. We learned that the only rule in war is winning." Skrell understood then what Queen Silith had seen in humans. They were dangerous not because they were strong or advanced. They were dangerous because they thought differently. An Ascari commander would never have attacked supply convoys or used psychological warfare. Those tactics were beneath their honor. Humans had no such limitations. "What happens now?" Skrell asked. Samuel straightened up. The sickness in his expression faded, replaced by cold determination. "Now we make Grath afraid. We hit him everywhere he isn't looking. We make him paranoid. We turn his own warriors against him. And we keep doing it until he either withdraws or makes a mistake big enough that we can end this war. That could take months. Then it takes months." Samuel returned his attention to the tactical displays. Grath wanted a war. He's going to get one. Just not the kind he expected. Over the following weeks, the Drachner advance completely stalled. Samuel's tactics became more unpredictable and more effective. The Ascari started winning engagements they should have lost. Other species in the galaxy took notice. The humans had only been spacefaring for 20 years, but their representative was fighting a war unlike anything the established powers had seen. Some species began to wonder if they had underestimated humanity. Others began to fear what humans might be capable of if they were ever the ones starting a war. Queen Silith watched Samuel work and understood both perspectives. She had chosen correctly. The human was preventing the Ascari extinction. But she also saw what the effort was costing him. Every victory left him more hollow. Every successful deception made him question who he was becoming. She worried that they might win the war but lose Samuel in the process. 5 months into the war, Samuel had become someone the Drachner called the Pale Demon. The name spread through their communication networks like a virus. Warriors who had never seen a human knew to fear the small, soft creature who commanded the Ascari forces with impossible cunning. General Skrell had stopped questioning Samuel's orders. The human strategies worked too consistently to doubt. Today they stood together in the war room, looking at reports from the latest engagement. A Drachner fleet of 20 warships had been lured into an asteroid field. Samuel had spent weeks seeding with hidden weapons platforms. 16 ships destroyed. The rest fled in disorder. "You predicted their exact approach vector," Skrell said. How? Samuel shrugged. He looked tired. He always looked tired now. Drachner commanders value aggressive action. They see a target, they attack directly. It makes them predictable once you understand their cultural mindset. Cultural warfare, Skrell said. The concept still felt wrong to him, but he couldn't argue with results. Using the enemy's own values against them. Every species has patterns, Samuel replied. Weaknesses built into their strengths. The Drachner value honor through direct combat, so they struggle with asymmetric warfare. They value unity under strong leaders, so sowing doubt about leadership effectiveness disrupts their cohesion. They're not stupid or weak. They're just playing a game they know while I'm playing a different game entirely. A communication alert interrupted them. Ambassador Lu appeared on the view screen, calling from Earth. She looked concerned. Samuel, we need to talk about the other species. What about them? 7 different civilizations have sent diplomatic requests to Earth in the past month. They want to discuss military alliances, technology exchanges, and strategic partnerships. They're calling humanity emerging strategic partners. Some of the older races are making very different requests. They want assurances that humans won't become aggressive. They're scared of you specifically. Samuel felt something twist in his stomach. I'm just trying to stop the Drachner. I know. But you're doing it in ways that are making the entire galaxy reconsider what humans are capable of. There are species with 10,000 years of space travel watching a human who's been off Earth for less than a year revolutionize modern warfare. That's terrifying to them. After the call ended, Samuel sat alone in his quarters. He had a small room in the Ascari Palace now, modified with furniture sized for humans. It felt less like home every day. He looked at his reflection in the dark window. His face had changed. Thinner, harder. The optimistic junior diplomat who took notes at meetings was gone. Someone else looked back at him now. Queen Silith found him there an hour later. She had started visiting more frequently as the war dragged on. Sometimes they talked about strategy. Sometimes they just sat in silence. Today she brought food, a human meal her staff had learned to prepare. You should eat, she said. Your biology requires more frequent nourishment than ours. Samuel accepted the food, but didn't eat immediately. Do you ever regret choosing me? Never. You have saved my people. I've also shown the galaxy that humans are dangerous. Ambassador Lu says other species are afraid of us now. They're afraid of what we might do if we ever became the aggressors instead of the defenders. Queen Silith settled onto the low couch beside him. Her compound eyes reflected the dim light. They should be afraid. Not because humans are inherently violent, but because you are survivors. You adapt. You overcome. These are valuable traits in allies and terrifying traits in enemies. The galaxy is learning this lesson through your actions. I used to think I was a good person, Samuel said quietly. Now I'm not sure. I've killed so many beings. I've lied and manipulated and used every dirty trick I could think of. And it worked. All of it worked. What does that make me? It makes you someone willing to bear a terrible burden so others don't have to. You carry the moral weight of these decisions. Lesser beings would justify their actions or feel no guilt. You feel the cost of every choice. That is what makes you good, Samuel. Before Samuel could respond, alarms sounded throughout the palace. They rushed to the war room. The displays showed a nightmare scenario. Warlord Grath had gathered his remaining forces into one massive fleet. Over 200 warships. He was moving directly toward Chiton Prime, the Ascari homeworld. He's abandoning all other objectives, Skrell reported. This is everything he has left. If he can destroy our capital, the Ascari Empire collapses even if we win every other battle. Samuel studied the tactical display. Grath was coming fast and direct. No tricks, no deception. Just overwhelming force aimed at the heart of the Ascari civilization. The defensive forces around Chiton Prime could slow him down but not stop him. Not against those numbers. He learned from our tactics, Samuel said. He's doing exactly what I would do in his position. Going for a decisive strike that ends the war regardless of other factors. Can we stop him? Queen Silith asked. Samuel didn't answer immediately. He ran calculations in his head, considering options and discarding them. Finally, he started giving orders. Evacuate the palace and all government centers. Pull the civilian population into deep shelters. Every warship we have gets positioned here, here, and here. He marked locations on the tactical display. Skrell looked at the positions Samuel indicated. Those are suboptimal defensive positions. We would have better coverage if we spread the fleet in a standard defensive sphere. We're not defending, Samuel said. We're hunting. Graf expects us to protect Chiton Prime conventionally. He'll approach assuming standard defensive patterns. Instead, we're going to let him think he's breaking through our defenses, then collapse on him from 3 sides. It's the same trap we used before, just on a larger scale. And if your prediction is wrong? Skrell asked. If Graf doesn't approach the way you expect, he could reach the surface and bombard the cities. Millions would die. Then millions die, Samuel said flatly. But they die anyway if we lose this battle. At least this way we have a chance. The Ascari moved quickly. Within 2 days, the capital was as prepared as possible. Civilians huddled in underground shelters. The military took up Samuel's assigned positions. Queen Silith stood beside Samuel on the orbital command station, watching the Drachner fleet approach. Are you certain? She asked quietly. No, Samuel admitted. But certainty is a luxury we don't have. The Drachner fleet arrived exactly when Samuel predicted. Graf's flagship led the formation, a massive vessel bristling with weapons. The Ascari defensive fleet engaged according to Samuel's plan, fighting just hard enough to seem like they were trying, but not hard enough to actually stop the advance. It had to look real. If Graf suspected a trap, he would adapt. The Drachner pushed forward. They broke through the first defensive line, then the second. Graf must have felt victory approaching. His homeworld was visible now, a green and blue sphere hanging in space. Just a little further, and his weapons could reach the surface. Samuel waited. Timing was everything. Too early and Graf could escape. Too late and the Drachner would reach bombardment range. Now, Samuel said. The hidden Ascari fleets emerged from their concealment positions. They had been hiding in the sensor shadows of Chiton Prime's 3 moons, waiting for this exact moment. 200 Drachner warships suddenly found themselves surrounded by nearly equal numbers of Ascari vessels. The battle that followed was the largest space engagement in modern galactic history. The orbital space around Chiton Prime became a chaotic nightmare of weapons fire and exploding ships. Samuel coordinated the Ascari forces with ruthless efficiency, directing them to focus fire on specific targets, exploiting every opening in the Drachner formation. Graf tried to adapt. His forces were well-trained and brave. They fought with the fury of warriors who knew they were facing extinction. For 3 hours, the outcome remained uncertain. Ships died on both sides. Samuel watched the casualty numbers climb and forced himself to feel nothing. He could have emotions later. Right now he needed to be cold and calculating. The turning point came when Samuel identified Graf's flagship attempting to break through toward the planet's surface. He sent everything available after it. 50 Ascari ships converged on the flagship from different angles. The Drachner vessel's shields collapsed under sustained fire. Graf's ship began venting atmosphere. He's trying to escape in a shuttle, Skrell reported. Should we destroy it? Samuel hesitated. Killing Graf would make him a martyr. The Drachner might fight even harder out of revenge. But letting him escape risked him rallying his forces for another attack. Queen Sylith made the decision. Capture him, alive. They tractored Grath's escape shuttle into the command station's docking bay. When the Drachner warlord emerged, he was injured but alive. He looked at Samuel with what might have been respect in his alien features. "You fight like no one I have ever encountered," Grath said. "Not with honor, but with effectiveness. Your species is more dangerous than I believed possible." "War isn't about honor," Samuel replied. "It's about making the other side stop fighting. You're stopped now. Surrender your remaining forces or I'll destroy them all." Grath laughed, a harsh sound that turned into a cough. "And if I refuse?" "Then you die here and your warriors die out there and the Drachner Confederation faces total collapse. Or you can surrender, we negotiate a real peace, and your people survive. Your choice." The warlord looked at Samuel for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You have won, human. I will order the surrender." Warlord Grath's surrender message went out on all Drachner military frequencies. Most of his forces complied immediately. They were exhausted, low on supplies, and facing an enemy who had consistently outmaneuvered them for months. The war ended not with a final climactic battle, but with tired warriors acknowledging defeat. Most forces complied. Not all. A Drachner commander named Riloth refused the surrender order. He had been Grath's rival in Drachner politics, one of those who had pushed for the war in the first place. Now he saw an opportunity. With Grath captured and disgraced, Riloth could claim leadership of the Confederation. He just needed one significant victory to prove his worth. He chose to attack Chiton Prime directly. Riloth had 12 warships under his command, all that remained of his personal battle group. Nowhere near enough to conquer the Ascari homeworld, but more than enough to cause massive damage before being stopped. He didn't care about conquest anymore. He cared about making a statement. Samuel was in the medical bay when the alert came through. He had been injured during the final battle, nothing serious but enough that Queen Sylith insisted he get proper treatment. The human was arguing with the medical technician about being released when Skrell's voice came over his communication device. "Riloth is attacking. 12 ships. They dropped out of hyperspace on the far side of the planet and are coming in fast on an attack vector aimed at the capital district." Samuel ran for the war room despite the medical technician's protests. His side hurt where he'd been thrown against a console during the battle, but he ignored it. He reached the command center within minutes. The tactical display showed Riloth's ships accelerating toward the planet. The remaining Ascari defensive fleet was moving to intercept, but they were out of position. Riloth would reach bombardment range of the cities before they could stop him. Civilian evacuation status? Samuel demanded. "Most people are still in shelters from the main battle," Skrell reported. "But the capital district has 3 million inhabitants. The shelters can't protect everyone from sustained orbital bombardment." Samuel studied the display. 12 ships. Relatively small battle group. But they were moving with the desperate speed of warriors who had nothing left to lose. He ran calculations in his head. The defensive fleet would arrive 2 minutes too late. Automated platforms might destroy half the attacking ships, but the rest would get through. "How many fighters do we have immediately available?" Samuel asked. "Fighters?" Skrell's antennae twitched in confusion. "Perhaps 200 scattered across various platforms and carriers. But fighters are support craft. They cannot effectively engage warships." "They can if they ram them," Samuel said quietly. "Get me 200 volunteer pilots. Tell them what I'm asking. Tell them they'll probably die." Queen Sylith, who had followed Samuel to the war room, touched his arm. "Samuel, no. There must be another way. There isn't. Not one that saves the civilians." He looked at her with those tired human eyes. "I'm asking them to volunteer. I won't order anyone to die." The call went out. Within 90 seconds, over 300 Ascari pilots volunteered. They knew what Samuel had done for their people. If he said this was necessary, they believed him. Samuel selected the 200 closest to Rilith's approach vector. He gave them precise targeting coordinates on each warship, focusing on engine sections and weapon systems. Then he opened a channel to all of them at once. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry there's no other way. I'm sorry I have to ask this. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for your courage." He gave the order. 200 Ascari fighter craft accelerated toward the incoming warships at maximum velocity. They were small and fast, difficult to target. Most of them reached their destinations. The collisions were brief flashes of light on the tactical display. 12 Drachner warships found their shields overwhelmed, and their hulls breached by kamikaze attacks. Some exploded immediately. Others were crippled, venting atmosphere, and tumbling out of control. Rilith's flagship survived the initial impacts. It continued toward the planet, damaged but still capable of bombardment. Samuel watched it approach. One ship. He could still stop it with conventional forces now that it was alone. But that would take time they didn't have. "There's a shuttle in Bay 3, Samuel said. "Fueled and ready?" Skrell realized what Samuel intended. "No, absolutely not. You are not a pilot. You are the co-regent. We need you. You need Chiton Prime more," Samuel said. He was already running toward the docking bay. Queen Sylith ran after him, faster on her 4 legs than Samuel was on 2. "Stop," she commanded. "This is foolish. You are not required to die proving your dedication." Samuel reached the shuttle and turned to face her. "I asked 200 Ascari to give their lives because I said it was necessary. How can I ask that and then refuse to do the same? If I survive this, I'll never be able to look at myself in a mirror again." "You're human," Queen Sylith said. "You're not trained for combat piloting. You'll die for nothing because you'll miss your target." "Probably," Samuel agreed. He climbed into the shuttle. "But I have to try. Because if I don't, 3 million people might die, and I'll have spent the rest of my life knowing I could have stopped it." The shuttle launched before anyone could physically stop him. Samuel had basic pilot training from his diplomatic corps' preparation, enough to fly in safe conditions. This was not safe conditions. He pushed the shuttle's engines to maximum and aimed directly at Rilith's flagship. The Drachner ship was massive up close, easily 1,000 times larger than Samuel's shuttle. He could see damage from the fighter impacts, see atmosphere venting from breaches in the hull. But the weapons systems were still active. Targeting lasers locked onto his shuttle. Samuel didn't try to evade. Dodging would just delay the inevitable. Instead, he accelerated directly at the flagship's bridge section. The Drachner fired. The shuttle's shields absorbed the first hits, then collapsed. Alarms screamed warnings about hull breaches and system failures. Samuel ignored them. He could see individual windows on the enemy ship now. Could see movement inside. Drachner crew members realizing what was about to happen. The impact felt like the universe ending. Samuel's consciousness fragmented into pain and light and sudden darkness. He woke up 3 days later in an Ascari medical facility. Every part of his body hurt. A medical technician was checking monitors beside his bed. When she noticed he was awake, her mandibles clicked in. What Samuel had learned was the Ascari expression for relief. Queen Sylith arrived within minutes. She looked at him with an expression Samuel couldn't quite read. Anger? Relief, both? "Your shuttle struck Rilith's bridge section," she said. "The explosion killed their command crew and disabled their weapon systems. The remaining Drachner forces surrendered immediately when Rilith died. The war is over." "Truly over this time. The civilians?" Samuel asked. His voice came out rough and painful. "Safe. You saved 3 million lives with your reckless stupidity." She moved closer to his bed. You nearly died. Your species is fragile compared to ours. The impact should have killed you instantly. Only the Ascari medical technology kept you alive long enough to stabilize. The pilots who died, Samuel said. 200 of them. Do they have families? Most did. We are providing full honors and support for their survivors. Samuel closed his eyes. 200 dead because of his plan. How many others throughout the war? He'd lost count somewhere around 10,000. The numbers had become too large to really comprehend. Each one had been a living being with thoughts and feelings and people who cared about them. All gone because of choices he made. The galaxy is calling you a hero, Queen Syleth said. The human who stopped a war. Already there are requests from dozens of species wanting to meet you, to learn from you, to recruit you for their own military forces. I don't feel like a hero, Samuel said. I feel like a killer who happened to be killing the right people. Queen Syleth was quiet for a moment. Perhaps that is what heroes truly are. Not people who feel no guilt, but people who do what must be done and carry the weight of those choices afterward. Samuel didn't have an answer for that. He just lay in the medical bed, alive when 200 better beings were dead, and tried to figure out how he was supposed to live with that. 2 months after the war ended, Harmony Watch hosted another galactic summit. The same station where Queen Syleth had chosen Samuel almost a year ago. Samuel stood in the same assembly hall, but everything felt different now. He wasn't sitting in the back row taking notes. He stood beside Queen Syleth at the front, wearing the formal insignia of an Ascari co-regent. The hall was more crowded this time. Every major species sent representatives. They all wanted to see the human who had changed modern warfare. Some looked at Samuel with admiration, others with poorly concealed fear, a few with calculation, already thinking about how to use or neutralize this new factor in galactic politics. The Drachna Confederation sent a delegation led by their new council leadership. Warlord Grath was alive but imprisoned, awaiting trial for war crimes. The new government had agreed to every term Samuel proposed: resource-sharing agreements, demilitarized zones, and regular diplomatic exchanges. They had no choice. The alternative was complete economic collapse after losing so much of their military. The peace treaty was signed with great ceremony. Dignitaries made speeches about cooperation and unity. Samuel said nothing during the official proceedings. He had written a speech but destroyed it. What could he say that wouldn't sound hollow? That war was terrible. Everyone knew that. That peace was precious. They wouldn't have fought if they believed it. After the ceremony, delegates lined up to speak with him privately. They all wanted something. The Velen Republic wanted to hire him as a military consultant. The Thorn Collective offered him command of their defense forces. A species called the Ortec asked if Earth would be interested in a mutual defense pact. With Samuel as the primary strategic coordinator, he declined everything politely. He had prepared these responses with Queen Syleth beforehand. She handled most of the political conversation while Samuel nodded and tried to look diplomatic rather than exhausted. Only one conversation felt genuine. A young Drachner warrior approached Samuel during a brief moment when he was alone. The warrior's scales were pale blue, marking him as barely adult by Drachner standards. He looked nervous. "I wanted to meet you," the warrior said through his translator. "My clutch brother died in the battle at Redshift Point, the first attack before the real war started. I hated you for what you did to my people." Samuel waited. He'd received plenty of hate already. Death threats came regularly through official channels. The Ascari security services filtered most of them out, but some got through. "But then I learned what Warlord Grath did," the warrior continued. "How he lied about the negotiations. How he used honor as an excuse for conquest. My clutch brother died for a leader's ambition, not for the Confederation's survival. You fought to protect your people. Grath fought to prove his strength. I understand the difference now. I'm sorry about your brother, Samuel said quietly. For what it's worth, I never wanted any of this. I wanted the negotiations to work. I know. That is why I wanted to meet you. To say that not all Draknar hate you. Some of us understand that you did what was necessary. My people have a saying, the strongest warrior is the one who prevents the fight. You tried to prevent it. When you could not, you ended it as quickly as possible. That is also strength. The warrior left. Samuel stood alone for a moment, trying to process the interaction. It didn't make the guilt go away, but it helped somehow. Knowing that at least one person understood, Queen Sylith found him that evening in the quarters assigned to them at Harmony Watch. She brought human food again, still trying to make sure he ate properly. They sat together looking out at the stars through the large viewport. "What will you do now?" she asked. "The war is over. The peace is established. You have fulfilled every obligation of the bond marriage and more. You could do anything. Go anywhere." Samuel had been thinking about this question for weeks. "I want to go home. Back to Earth." Queen Sylith's antennae drooped slightly. In Askari body language, it meant sadness. "I thought you might say that. You miss your world." "I do. But it's more than that." Samuel struggled to find the right words. "I've spent the last year learning how to be a weapon. How to outthink and outfight beings with thousands of years more experience than me. I got good at it. Too good. And that terrifies me. You saved billions of lives. I know. And I'd do it again if I had to. That's what scares me. I've proven that humans can be incredibly effective at warfare when we need to be. But we shouldn't want to be. We should remember why we fight, not just how to fight. I need to go home and remember how to be human again. The version of human that tries diplomacy first, that values peace more than victory. The galaxy will not forget what you did," Queen Sylith said. "Other species will study your tactics. Some will try to replicate them. Others will develop counters to them. You have changed warfare forever, simply by demonstrating what is possible when someone thinks outside established conventions. I know. That's another reason to go home. If I stay, I become a permanent military asset. Species will either try to recruit me or eliminate me. Earth becomes a military power just by association with me. I don't want that. Humans should join the galactic community as partners and explorers, not as warriors." They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Queen Sylith spoke again. "I will miss you. In these months, you have become more than a political partner. You have become a friend. Perhaps the first true friend I have had in a position of power. Everyone else wants something from me. You just wanted to do the right thing." "I'll miss you too," Samuel admitted. "You believed in me when nobody else did. You trusted a random junior diplomat to help save your people. That takes courage. Or desperation," Queen Sylith said with what might have been Askari humor. "But it worked. The human experiment succeeded beyond my expectations." The next day, Samuel boarded a transport ship heading for Earth. General Skrell came to see him off, along with dozens of other Askari officials who had worked with him during the war. Skrell actually bowed, a gesture of deep respect among the Askari military. "You taught me that there are many kinds of strength," the general said. "Not all of them involve fighting fairly. I did not like your methods at first. I thought them dishonorable. But honor means nothing to the dead. You kept my people alive. That is all that matters." The transport trip took 3 weeks. Samuel spent most of it alone, thinking about the past year. About everything he'd done and everything he'd lost. He'd left Earth as an optimistic junior diplomat who believed all problems could be solved through dialogue and understanding. He was returning as someone who knew exactly how to win wars through deception, psychological warfare, and ruthless tactics. He wasn't sure which version of himself was real anymore. Maybe both. Maybe that was what it meant to be human, holding contradictory truths simultaneously and trying to choose the better path anyway. Earth looked beautiful from orbit. Blue and green and white, exactly as he remembered. Home. Samuel felt something relax in his chest that had been tight for months. The shuttle landed at the same spaceport where he'd departed a year ago. There was a crowd waiting. Media reporters, government officials, curious citizens who wanted to see the human who had become famous across the galaxy. Samuel ignored them all. He walked through the crowd until he found a quiet park near the spaceport. Children were playing there. Human children, laughing and running and completely unaware of galactic politics or interstellar warfare. Samuel sat on a bench and watched them. This was what he'd been fighting for. Not territory or resources or political advantage. Just the chance for people to live normal lives without fear. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, approached him. She had a data pad in her hands showing a news article with Samuel's picture. "Are you the famous Samuel Reed?" "I'm Samuel Reed," he said carefully. "I don't know about famous." "You stopped a war," the girl said with the absolute certainty of a child. "My teacher said you're a hero." Samuel thought about the 200 pilots who died following his orders. About the thousands of beings killed in battles he orchestrated. About Warlord Grath, who'd been a product of his culture, just as much as Samuel was a product of his. "I'm just someone who tried to do the right thing," he told the girl. "And I hope you never have to make the choices I did." The girl didn't really understand, but she smiled anyway and ran back to her friends. Samuel stayed in the park until sunset, watching the sky change colors. Somewhere up there, Queen Silith was probably in a council meeting discussing post-war reconstruction. General Skrell was likely training his forces in the new tactics Samuel had introduced. The galaxy was adapting to the lessons learned from the war. But here, on this bench, in this park, Samuel could just be a human who was tired and damaged and trying to figure out how to live with his memories. The war was over. The peace was established. Now came the harder part, learning how to live in that peace after everything he'd done to achieve it. As the stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Samuel made himself a promise. He would spend the rest of his life working for peace, using every lesson he'd learned about strategy and human nature. But he would do it the right way this time. Through cooperation, not manipulation. Through understanding, not deception. The galaxy had learned that humans could be warriors when necessary. Now Samuel would remind them that humans could be something better, bridge builders between species, advocates for peaceful solutions, and living examples that the capacity for violence and the choice for peace could exist in the same being. It wouldn't erase what he'd done. Nothing could do that. But maybe, eventually, it would help him remember who he wanted to be.